Hello, respect givers. Welcome to English Story School. Part 1. The simple hello that changed everything. What if the person you walk past every single day, without a second thought, turned out to be far more extraordinary than you could ever imagine? It's funny, isn't it? Life doesn't announce its turning points with fireworks or loud music. It slips them quietly into the ordinary moments, a passing glance, a simple word, a tiny act that feels like nothing in the moment, until later, when you look back and realize it was everything. For Emma, her turning point began with nothing more than a hello. Every morning, the city roared with chaos. Horns blared, heels clicked against the pavement, and the endless rush of people moved like a current sweeping everyone in its tide. Emma was one of them, a young professional with ambition in her eyes and exhaustion on her shoulders. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, and a to-do list running like a ticker tape in her mind. Meetings, deadlines, emails, presentations. Her life was one long checklist of tasks to survive through. And yet, in that rush, there was always one pause. Just before she entered her office building, she would glance to the side, where an older man stood with a mop, a bucket, or sometimes just leaning against the wall, waiting for the next task. He wore a faded uniform and carried himself with quiet dignity. His name was Mr. Harris. Most people barely noticed him. To them, he blended into the background, as invisible as the walls he cleaned. But not to Emma. For some reason she couldn't fully explain, she made sure to greet him every single morning. "Good morning, sir," she'd say, her voice cutting through the rush, her smile genuine. And Mr. Harris would always respond the same way, with a slight nod, a gentle smile, and eyes that carried a warmth deeper than words. At first it was nothing, ordinary, a reflex of basic decency. But here's the truth. What we call small moments are often the biggest in disguise. As weeks turned into months, that tiny exchange became part of her ritual. The coffee kept her awake. The checklist kept her busy. But the greeting, that simple hello, kept her human. One rainy morning, Emma arrived drenched, her umbrella useless against the storm. She rushed through the revolving doors, cursing under her breath. And there he was, standing near the entrance, quietly wiping the floor so no one would slip. Their eyes met, and despite her soaked clothes and frustrated sighs, she found herself smiling. "Rough morning?" Mr. Harris asked, his voice calm, almost amused. "You could say that." Emma laughed nervously, shaking water from her coat, and he nodded, offering her a piece of advice she would never forget. Storms don't last, but the people who keep walking through them, they do. That was the first time he had said more than a few words to her. It startled her in the best way. And in that moment, Emma realized something. The man she had been greeting every day wasn't just a janitor sweeping floors. He was someone who saw life from a perspective most people ignored. Respect costs nothing, but it can mean everything. Those words echoed in Emma's mind more often than she expected, because as the days went on, she noticed something strange. She began looking forward to that morning exchange. It wasn't about politeness anymore. It was about connection, a reminder that even in the most exhausting days, even in the middle of life's storms, there was still space for kindness. But here's the twist. Kindness isn't a one-way street. When you give it freely, it has a way of circling back, often in ways you can't predict. Emma didn't know it yet, but her simple greetings were planting seeds. Seeds of trust, seeds of recognition, seeds that would grow into something far beyond her imagination. One morning, she noticed something unusual. She arrived a bit earlier than usual, and Mr. Harris wasn't cleaning. He was standing outside, reading a newspaper, not just skimming the headlines like most people, but fully immersed, flipping carefully through every section. She found herself pausing, curious. "You're here early," she said. He chuckled, folding the paper neatly. "Old habits. I like to know what's happening in the world before the world rushes past me." Emma tilted her head, amused. "Most people just scroll on their phones. Phones tell you what they want you to know," he replied calmly. "But if you want to understand people, you've got to see the whole picture. The stories they hide in the back pages are just as important as the ones on the front." It struck her. There was a sharpness in his words, a depth of awareness that seemed out of place for a man everyone assumed lived in the shadows of the building. Never judge someone by the role they play in your story, she thought later, because in their own story, they might be the author, not the side character. And so, little by little, her curiosity grew. Who exactly was this man? Why did he always carry himself with such quiet confidence, even while doing a job most people overlooked? She couldn't shake the thought. What if there's more to him than meets the eye? Life has a way of hiding extraordinary people in the most ordinary places. Sometimes, the janitor you greet with a smile isn't just sweeping floors. He's holding secrets you can't even dream of. And Emma was about to find out just how much a simple hello could change everything. Part 2, more than meets the eye. Days turned into weeks, and weeks melted into months. The rhythm of the city never slowed down. People rushing with briefcases, earbuds, and caffeine-driven energy. But for Emma, mornings began to feel different. They weren't just about coffee and deadlines anymore. They had gained a small but powerful ritual, a few words exchanged with Mr. Harris. At first, it was nothing more than polite acknowledgments. The weather, the traffic, a simple smile. Yet as time went on, those exchanges began to shift. They became a thread in her day, thin, almost fragile, but steady enough to remind her that beneath the noise of life, there were still voices worth hearing. One morning, Emma entered the lobby looking drained. A big presentation loomed over her, her mind clouded with anxiety. Mr. Harris, standing with his mop near the elevator, noticed her expression before she even opened her mouth. "Rough day ahead?" he asked gently, as though he could read the storm in her eyes. Emma sighed, exhaling more than just air. "Aren't they all?" Mr. Harris chuckled softly, his tone not dismissive, but reassuring. "Storms don't last forever. Neither do rough days." She froze. For a moment, the buzzing lobby faded. No clicking heels, no ringing phones, no chatter. Just those words, simple yet heavy with truth, hanging in the air. That line stayed with her all day. When her meeting went off track, when the slides glitched, when her boss threw in unexpected questions, she kept replaying his voice in her head. Storms don't last forever. By the end of the day, she realized he wasn't just offering comfort. He was reminding her of resilience. It wasn't just small talk anymore. It was wisdom, and that struck her deeply, because wisdom, she thought, rarely comes from the voices shouting the loudest. Often, it comes from the quietest ones. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest lessons. From that day forward, Emma paid closer attention. She began noticing the way Mr. Harris observed everything around him. While most people rushed through the lobby, eyes glued to their screens, he stood in the background, watching with a kind of patience that only came from living through storms of his own. He never rushed, never seemed flustered. He was steady, the kind of steady that made others slow down, even for a heartbeat. One crisp autumn morning, Emma asked, "How do you always stay so calm? Don't you ever have bad days?" Mr. Harris smiled, leaning lightly on his mop. "Of course I do. Everyone does. But calm isn't the absence of storms. It's learning to dance in the rain." Emma laughed softly, but she felt the truth of it settle in her chest. His words didn't sound rehearsed, but like something copied from a book. They sounded lived, carved into his bones by experiences she couldn't yet imagine. And the more she spoke to him, the more questions filled her mind. Who was this man really? Why did he seem so grounded, so wise? Why did a janitor, someone the world overlooked daily, speak with the kind of clarity that leaders and mentors often lacked? Curiosity became her quiet obsession. On another morning, when she mentioned how overwhelming her workload was, he said, "Don't measure your life by the weight you carry. Measure it by the strength you build carrying it." Another time, when she joked about how meaningless some of her tasks felt, he replied, "Nothing is meaningless if it teaches you who you are becoming." And perhaps the most striking moment came when she asked him if he ever regretted anything in life. He paused, looked at her with eyes that seemed older than time, and said, "Regret is a heavy chain. I've carried it before, but one day I realized the lock was always in my own hands." His words sent chills down her spine. They weren't just clever lines. They were survival notes, and she began to sense there was more beneath his calm exterior than anyone realized. But here's the thing about life. It doesn't reveal truths all at once. It teases them out, slowly, like a book where every page deepens the mystery. Emma found herself thinking about him outside of their short exchanges. She told a colleague once, "The janitor in our building, he's different. He doesn't just talk, he teaches without trying to." Her colleague laughed dismissively. "Emma, he's a janitor. Don't overthink it." But Emma wasn't convinced. She remembered something Mr. Harris once said when she mentioned how invisible people seem to treat him. People only see what they expect. Look deeper, and you'll find more than meets the eye. Those words haunted her, not in a fearful way, but in a way that made her look closer. And so she started to watch. Subtly, carefully. She noticed how he greeted everyone, whether they acknowledged him or not. She noticed the way he remembered small details, how one coworker liked his coffee black, how another had a sick child at home, how the receptionist's mother was in the hospital. He noticed people the way the world failed to. Emma realized she was learning from him without even meaning to. He had become, in his own quiet way, a mentor she never asked for but desperately needed. Sometimes the greatest teachers don't stand at the front of a classroom, she thought one evening. Sometimes they mop the floors you walk across without noticing. But still, she couldn't shake her growing suspicion. This man wasn't ordinary. His wisdom, his presence, his way of seeing life, it all felt too big, too vast, to be hidden behind a janitor's uniform. One late evening, as she stayed behind finishing work, she spotted him again, not cleaning, but sitting quietly in the lobby with a small leather notebook in his hand. She passed by slowly, pretending not to notice, but her eyes caught glimpses of neat handwriting filling the pages. Quotes, reflections, thoughts that sounded like poetry. Her heart skipped. There was more to this man than anyone could guess. And soon, Emma was about to discover just how loud his story really was. Part 3. The Shocking Revelation. Friday afternoons usually meant relief. The week was winding down, people's energy dipped, and conversations in the office turned toward weekend plans. But this Friday, the air buzzed with tension. Something was different. Whispers darted across cubicles like wildfire. Emails were half-written, phone calls left unanswered. Did you hear? The building's been sold, someone gasped near the printer. Emma's ears perked. She turned to listen as her coworker leaned in closer. They say a new owner has taken over. Some big investor. Probably means layoffs. Changes, who knows? The uncertainty spread quickly, gripping the office like a storm cloud. Faces tightened, laughter disappeared, and eyes filled with dread. No one knew what to expect. Change, after all, often carries the scent of fear. Emma felt her own chest tighten. Layoffs? Changes? She had just found her footing here. What would this mean for her future? And then, the impossible happened. As the staff gathered in the lobby, waiting to be addressed by whoever this new owner was, the elevator doors slid open. Out stepped a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His shoes gleamed, his posture was tall, his presence commanding. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Every eye turned toward him. Emma's heart skipped, because she recognized him instantly. It was Mr. Harris, the janitor she had greeted every morning. The quiet man who offered her wisdom between mop strokes and floor polish. The man invisible to everyone else, yet unforgettable to her. Now he stood before them, not with a mop in his hand, but with authority radiating from his very being. The lobby fell into stunned silence. Jaws dropped. A pen clattered to the ground, but no one even glanced at it. Emma's pulse quickened as reality crashed over her. Mr. Harris wasn't a janitor at all. He was Mr. James Harris, the actual owner of the building. The room seemed to tilt, the walls shrinking closer. Emma's thoughts raced. All this time, the man sweeping the floors was the man who owned them. Her breath caught as memory after memory replayed. The wisdom he spoke, the calm he carried, the way he noticed people when no one else did. It all made sense now. He hadn't just been kind, he'd been deliberate. He had been teaching without ever announcing who he truly was. And now the mask had lifted. The new janitor was the leader they had all been waiting for. James Harris stepped into the conference room where the employees had gathered, his footsteps echoing like thunder. He looked around, meeting eyes one by one, not with arrogance, but with a weight that came from truth. Finally, he spoke. His voice was deep, steady, but filled with fire. You never know who you're talking to. Titles are temporary. Character is permanent. Boom. The words hit like lightning. The room froze, silence heavy as stone. Emma felt goosebumps crawl along her skin. She glanced around at her co-workers. Some stared in disbelief, others fidgeted nervously, and a few looked utterly embarrassed. After all, how many of them had walked past him without a glance? How many had dismissed him as invisible? Emma's chest swelled with both pride and awe. She had spoken to him. She had seen him. She had chosen kindness when others chose blindness. James continued, his voice calm, yet piercing. Too many people judge by appearances. They see a uniform and assume a role. But I chose to walk these halls not to see who noticed my wealth, but to see who noticed my humanity. The tension in the room thickened. Emma felt her heart pounding, every word etching itself deep into her soul. Respect, he went on, isn't something you show when you think someone can offer you something in return. Respect is who you are when no one's watching. Emma thought back to that first day she greeted him. Her small act now felt monumental. That choice had mattered. That moment had defined her character. And then came the line that sealed it, that shattered every lingering assumption in the room. James Harris looked out at his employees and said firmly, "Never look down on someone unless you're helping them up." The silence cracked. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was the sound of realization, the collective guilt of dozens of people suddenly remembering every time they had walked past him without acknowledgement. Every time they had muttered complaints under their breath. Every time they had chosen ignorance over respect. Emma's eyes burned. Her heart wasn't just racing now, it was thundering, because she realized something profound. The man she thought she was being kind to was really teaching her the lesson of a lifetime. That moment wasn't about money, power, or even surprise. It was about truth. Character matters. Integrity matters. How you treat the least visible person in the room reveals more about you than how you treat the most powerful one. Emma clenched her coffee cup tighter, whispering under her breath, "I get it now." It felt like the entire office had been flipped upside down. Everything they thought they knew about hierarchy, value, and importance had been rewritten in seconds. The janitor was the owner. And the lesson? You never really know who you're standing in front of, or how much impact your words and actions may carry. Power doesn't reveal character, James added as he wrapped up his speech. Character reveals power. Emma felt her world shift. This wasn't just about a shocking revelation. This was about the stripping away of illusions. The man she thought was sweeping floors had been sweeping away arrogance, entitlement, and assumptions the entire time. And from this day forward, nothing, not her mornings, not her interactions, not her perspective, would ever be the same again. Part 4. The Lesson Beyond the Mask. When the shock of revelation settled and the buzz of the office began to fade, Emma couldn't shake the questions swirling in her head. Who really was James Harris? Why had he chosen to live behind a mop and a uniform when he had the power to walk in wearing a crown of authority? Curiosity gnawed at her until she finally gathered the courage to approach him privately. She found him in the quiet of the conference room, now empty after the chaos of the day. He stood by the window, looking out at the city below. The skyline glittered with ambition, but his eyes looked deeper, past the buildings, past the noise, into something more eternal. "Mr. Harris," Emma began softly, her voice a mix of hesitation and boldness. "Can I ask you something?" He turned, that familiar calm smile lighting his face. "Of course, Emma. What's on your mind?" She took a breath, steadying herself. Why did you pretend to be the janitor all this time?" He didn't flinch at the question. Instead, he chuckled, shaking his head gently. "I wasn't pretending," he said. His tone was firm, but his words carried the weight of experience. "This is my building, but before it was mine, I worked every job in it. cleaning floors, carrying boxes, fixing lights, answering phones. Every corner of this place holds a memory of struggle. Emma blinked, stunned. You actually did all that? Every job, he repeated, his eyes sharp with conviction. And when the building finally became mine, I made a promise to myself, never to forget where I came from, never to let pride erase the value of hard work. That's why I put on the uniform again, not to trick anyone, but to test them, to see how people treat those they think are beneath them, because that tells me far more about their heart than their resume ever will. The words hit Emma like a wave. Her chest tightened, her throat dry. She realized the depth behind his disguise. It wasn't just a social experiment. It was a mirror held up to the soul of every person who walked those halls. She thought back to her co-workers, the way they brushed past him, barely acknowledging his presence. She remembered the rushed footsteps, the clipped tones, the muttered complaints. And then she thought of herself, the smile, the greeting, the small talks that had seemed meaningless but now felt monumental. For the first time, she truly understood. Kindness had never been small. It had been everything. Mr. Harris stepped closer, his gaze steady, piercing into her like truth itself. The way you treat people who can do nothing for you, he said slowly, reveals everything about who you really are. Emma's breath caught. She felt those words etch themselves into her heart like fire on stone. They weren't just advice. They were a commandment, a challenge, a mirror reflecting her own soul. And maybe, if you're listening closely, they're etching into yours too. Because here's the question James Harris asked without saying it. Who are you when no one's watching? Emma swallowed hard, her thoughts spinning. How do I treat the waiter when my food is late? The delivery driver at my door? The security guard who checks my badge? Do I offer them the same warmth I give to my boss or my friends? Or do I choose convenience over compassion? Her silence must have spoken louder than words, because Mr. Harris smiled knowingly. It's not about perfection, Emma. It's about intention. Everyone gets busy. Everyone gets tired. But character shines in those unguarded moments when you think no one is paying attention. Emma's eyes stung, not from sadness, but from awakening. She had always thought success was measured in promotions, salaries, recognition. But standing here listening to this man who had lived both poverty and prosperity, she realized something radical. Success was measured in humanity. True greatness, Mr. Harris added, isn't about how high you climb. It's about how many people you lift along the way. The words sank deep, reshaping everything she thought she knew. She remembered her rushed mornings, the way she sometimes brushed past the receptionist with nothing more than a nod. She remembered the nights she stayed late, too tired to say thank you to the cleaning crew. And she realized that while she had been kind to him, she had plenty of blind spots too. Her cheeks burned with humility, but instead of shame, she felt gratitude. Because here was a man who wasn't scolding her, but inviting her into something greater, a way of living that was richer than any paycheck. Emma whispered, almost to herself, I think I understand now. But James wasn't finished. He leaned against the window, his reflection mixing with the city lights. Emma, you saw me when others didn't. That spoke volumes about who you are. But don't stop there. Don't let kindness be an accident. Let it be your standard. Because one act of respect can ripple into a lifetime of impact. His words were like oxygen. Sharp, necessary, life-giving. Emma nodded slowly, her heart steady now. She thought back to the first hello, the small seed that had sprouted into this moment. She understood now that every choice mattered, every word carried weight, every interaction left a mark, either building someone up or tearing them down. And then, in the silence that followed, James dropped one last line that would live in her forever. People will forget your job title. They'll forget your salary, your office, even your achievements. But they will never forget how you made them feel. Emma felt tears pool in her eyes. It wasn't sadness. It was awakening. She realized she had been handed a gift that most people never receive in their lifetime, a chance to see beyond the mask of status and into the truth of humanity. As she left the room that day, the world outside hadn't changed. The city still buzzed, the deadline still loomed, the task still waited. But inside Emma, everything was different. Because once you've seen the lesson behind the mask, you can never unsee it again. Part 5. The Ripple of One Choice. From that day forward, Emma's life carried a new rhythm. The fluorescent lights of the office no longer hummed with monotony. They glowed with possibility. Every hallway, every desk, every person became a reminder of what she had witnessed. The janitor who wasn't a janitor, the man who had shattered illusions with nothing more than truth. The lesson didn't fade with time. In fact, it grew louder. Because once you've seen character trump title, you can never unsee it. Emma began to notice things she had overlooked before. The receptionist's tired smile at 8 a.m. The delivery driver balancing boxes heavier than his frame. The security guard fighting sleep during late-night shifts. They weren't background characters anymore. They were human stories, waiting to be acknowledged. And so Emma made a choice, a deliberate one. She decided that respect would no longer be occasional. It would be her constant. Every hello, every thank you, every moment of eye contact became a seed she chose to plant. It didn't take long before people noticed. Colleagues began to follow her example. Small gestures multiplied. The office, once cold and transactional, slowly began to breathe with warmth. And while promotions and deadlines still came and went, something far greater had taken root. Culture. Because here's the truth. One act of respect is contagious. It spreads like wildfire, igniting corners you never imagined. Emma saw it firsthand. The quiet intern who once walked with his head down now greeted others with confidence. The cleaning staff, often invisible, were met with genuine appreciation, and the ripple kept expanding. Meetings felt lighter, collaboration smoother, people more willing to step in for each other. But Emma's journey didn't stop at the office walls. She carried it into the streets, into coffee shops, into her home. When a waiter spilled water on her table, she smiled instead of scowled. When a stranger struggled with grocery bags, she lent a hand. When her younger brother came to her with dreams others dismissed as foolish, she listened, truly listened, because she knew now that respect wasn't about status, it was about humanity. Every time she acted, she could almost hear Mr. Harris's voice echoing in her mind. The way you treat people who could do nothing for you reveals everything about who you really are. And slowly, Emma realized something extraordinary. Her kindness wasn't just shaping others. It was reshaping her. The world began to feel bigger and smaller at the same time. Bigger because she could see the depth in people she had once ignored. Smaller because the distance between herself and others shrank. Connection had replaced indifference. That's the ripple no one talks about. The way a single choice can bend the course of your entire life. Emma rose in her career, yes. But more importantly, she rose in her character. She became the person people trusted, not because of her title, but because of her heart. She was promoted into leadership, and when she remembered Harris's words, "Titles are temporary. Character is permanent." So she built her leadership on humanity, not hierarchy. And here's the bold part. It worked. Her team outperformed others, not because they feared her, but because they respected her. And they respected her because she respected them. Simple, but revolutionary. Now let me turn the mirror toward you. How many janitors do you walk past every day without noticing? How many stories do you ignore because you're too busy scrolling, too busy climbing, too busy proving? Be honest. It's easy to think kindness is a luxury, that respect is optional, that you'll slow down someday. But here's the spark. Someday never comes. The chance is now. The ripple begins the moment you decide to see the invisible. Emma learned that, and so can you. Because the truth is, you don't need wealth or titles to make an impact. You don't need a stage or a spotlight. All you need is the courage to respect someone who can give you nothing in return. That's the beginning of legacy. Think about it. The world doesn't remember the cold CEO who barked orders. It remembers the leader who lifted others. It doesn't honor the arrogant, but the compassionate. Statues are built for those who served, not those who demanded service. So what about you? When the noise of achievement fades, when your resume gathers dust, when your title is passed to someone else, what will remain? The answer is simple: the way you made people feel. Emma understood this because one man, in a janitor's uniform, showed her the mirror of truth. And that mirror now stands before you. Look at it. Really look. Are you the person who rushes past the invisible? Or are you the one who sees them, greets them, respects them? Because one day, you might find out that the janitor was never just a janitor. One day, the world might flip the script, and you'll realize your small gesture wasn't so small after all. That's the ripple of one choice, and it's yours to make today. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.